coming out to vote early just because I don't really want to wait in the lines come November 4th, so figured it was my day off, and here I am.
Yesterday, I believe we did 400, almost 500 voters. So we do know that there is a need for early voting for these individuals who, again, can't make it to the polls on Election Day, or two, to avoid the long lines.
I don't have to get up at 6 o'clock in the morning trying to get to the poll, or try to get off early, and the polls close at 6. And most people in Indiana, we don't get off at 6.
We've had a United States congressman vote early, state senators vote early, state representatives vote early, mayors vote early.
Took my niece, took my sister, took my brother-in-law, took some more people, and it's fantastic. It's fantastic.
They had early voting in the primary in these three cities, Gary, Hammond, and East Chicago. Fast forward to the general election, and all of a sudden all the Republicans have a problem with early voting in these cities.
Chicago, Illinois, Cook County, right now they have 95 early voting stations open, and people are voting in Chicago. But in Gary, Indiana, they're saying to us, we don't want you to vote early.
According to what they have said and what we have heard, is that they were afraid of vote fraud.
Indiana's a pretty strict state when it comes to voting. You can't walk in there and say, well, I'm Joe Blow. Well, let me see your ID.
It's difficult to have the vote fraud on the in-person voting because you are having to show photo identification. One, it has to have your photo on it. Two, your name has to conform with the voter registration record. And it must be issued either by the U.S. government or the state of Indiana.
In Gary, Indiana, in the last 45 years, not one person has ever been indicted for vote fraud. So that's another smokescreen to say we don't want you to have early voting.
The problem of voter fraud is raised actually a lot to justify not adopting reforms that would make it easier to vote.
And so now we've been in court.
We've had lots of testimony. We've been in various courts over the past several weeks.
Left Judge Hawkins' court and went to Judge Van Bocken's court, from Van Bocken's court to Arredondo's court, from Arredondo's court.
A real commitment to the right to vote would not create so many opportunities to not count ballots.
Back to Judge Hawkins' court, then to the state appellate court, 6 courts.
I assume that the legal battle will continue.
It's like playing ping pong with the voters, you know?
Yeah. And then, why do they just want to shut down the voting in Indiana? Why don't they shut down the voting in all the other states?
I think Indiana, for the first time in decades, is now, a battleground state for all intensive purposes.
No Democrat has ever, in the history of this state, ever won statewide unless you win Gary in big numbers.
So they're obviously worried that early voting in these cities will increase higher turnout.
The most people that will be shut out if they do not have the early voting will be African American people and Hispanic people that live on the north end of the county.
It's a historical election this year, and so this will probably be the biggest turnout we see.
I came out for early voting.
I voted early.
I'm going to vote early.
If you have early voting, you have a lot more days to make plans with somebody or just find transportation to come out to vote.
We're not going to allow these folks to tell us we can't vote.
It was already mandated that we could vote early. So how are you going to come in later on and say that your vote don't count?
When you tell a person they can't vote, you really stir that person up. That person's ready now to go vote any kind of which or way he can.